We go now to Kenneth Stein. He's a Director of Israel Studies at Emory University and the President at the Centre for Israel Education. Thanks so much for joining us. What do you think Israel's objectives here? And when Netanyahu told his citizens that to be prepared for a long war, how long do you think we're talking? Months, years?
Until Israel feels it has accomplished its objective, which would, as stated, to eliminate Hamas as a functioning element in the Gaza Strip that could threaten Israel's well-being in the future. But that's how long it'll take.
So if Netanyahu's main goal is to destroy Hamas, how will they know when they've actually been successful? I mean, there'll be new disaffected youth coming up through the ranks, re-established in other regions, funded again by Iran. How will we know what success is from Israel's perspective?
When the Israeli government and its military believe that Hamas is no longer functioning and capable of inflicting horrendous killing of babies, pregnant women, like they did on October 7th. It's a pretty clear-cut distinction, and it has to be in the eyes of the person or the individual or the state that was attacked. They're the ones who are going to have to decide when it is over. When it is over, they're also going to have to come to a conclusion on how do they wish to have Gaza relate to them as a neighbor to the south. And one of the possibilities, something that I actually wrote about 21 years ago, was to establish a trusteeship. But it sort of fell on deaf ears and never went anywhere, but it may be revised, because you have to find a way for the Palestinians to govern themselves and live in a means where they can provide for themselves and also live with the people next door.
So what do you think Israelis are facing as they go into Hamas? It's a very challenging feat. Of course, we know they want to dismantle Hamas. They want to bring back the hostages. Those two combined isn't impossible, but incredibly difficult. What does a ground operation mean, not just for the families of the hostages, but also for the people of Gaza who are now trying to live without food, water, and even the means to communicate?
I think the objective is to bring a measure of safety for at least the Israelis. That's how they see it. And I think most Israelis have been saying they want to minimize the amount of collateral damage or damage that's being applied to those in the Gaza South. The Israeli people have sort of come together in a rather remarkable way to help one another. Civic responsibility has really shown, as 150,000 Israelis have had to move from the north into the south. That doesn't answer the question, of course, on how do you provide water and food and shelter for the residents of Gaza. I believe that one of the reasons that the Israelis are crystal clear about not wanting to restart the cell phones or the electricity, that they don't want Hamas to be able to communicate with the outside world. And that has as much to do with denying people inside Gaza the ability to speak on the phone or to communicate with different parts of Gaza. I think it has to do with how do you cut off Gaza from the rest of the world.
There's no doubt that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict over time has been one of the most divisive in the world today. Protests across the world, even just today, London, Istanbul, even in New York. And in New York, many of those protesters were Jews calling for a ceasefire. Israelis are very divided over the conflict. Polls indicate that Israelis are furious with Netanyahu, that they blame him. How would you describe this political moment in Israel and how it's dividing the world?
Well, I don't think Israelis are, they may be divided about Netanyahu, they're not divided about surviving as a state. I think all the polls indicate that 93% of Israelis are fully in favor of demolishing Hamas for what happened on October 7th. You have to make a distinction between the politician and the state. And I think the 7.5 or 8 million Israelis, 9 million Israelis, including Israeli Arabs, by the way, very much in favor of seeing Israel succeed. They also understand that it's, as you said, it's very, very difficult to try and reconcile how do you return 230 hostages and at the same time keep on ratcheting up the attack on Gaza in order to make Hamas less functional. It's a very difficult balance. And if you're a politician, you have to go at it. However, if you ratchet it up to such a degree that the folks who are holding the hostages say, Uncle, I may have to provide you with some hostages or all of them, then maybe the upping of the violence or the attack on Hamas in Gaza may in fact have a salutary effect. We are in the middle of something that's very dynamic and very fluid. And for you or for me or for someone who's reporting from Istanbul or from Gaza to predict on what's going to be tomorrow is almost foolhardy, because there are too many variables that we cannot put our arms around because we haven't seen what tomorrow looks like.
It's incredibly difficult to get into war, but it's just as difficult, if not harder, to get out of war. Do you think that there's a danger now that's in Netanyahu's political interest to keep this war going on for as long as he can?
No.
Why?
Because every day you keep the war going, what you're doing is it's costing the Israeli people. And, you know, he knows that reckoning is coming. You know, this has got to stop focusing on Benjamin Netanyahu and start focusing on Israelis who believe that their state is under a duress unlike it has suffered in 75 years. That's how Israelis see this. This is not Ken Stein's view on how Israelis see it. This is how Israelis see it. This is what the Israeli press is saying. This is what they're saying about themselves. We are facing an existential threat which must be pushed back. It's not Bibi Netanyahu. It's not Gantz. It's not Gallant. It's no one in the Israeli leadership. It's the Israeli people who have a fear of extinction. And that's not compromisable. And they're willing to say that out loud, and they're willing to say it to other Israelis and to other people throughout the world who are willing to listen.
I have a feeling that the people of Gaza may be feeling exactly the same thing, that they are becoming extinct.
Well, they may. Yes, they may feel that way. They may, but war is not an easy thing to transit. It's a very difficult enterprise. People don't want to go to war. People want to avoid killing. Israelis did not go to war on October 6th. Let's not forget that.
No,
if you hadn't had October 7th, you wouldn't have this.
All right.
Period.
We'll leave it there. Kenneth Stein, thank you very much for your time. Director of Israel Studies at Emory University and President at the Center for Israel Education.